Welcome to Cultivated Live for Thursday, May 23rd. I want to be sure I got that right. I do. Thursday, May 23rd. My name is Jay Rosenthal. I'm the co-founder of Cultivated Media, the host of this program, Cultivated Live. And since we launched, our goal at Cultivated has been to be cannabis industry first, providing you, our viewers and readers, with the most important, insightful, useful, and timely information. We do that in a couple of ways. We do that through our daily newsletter at Cultivated Daily. We do that through this daily live stream at Cultivated Live. We'd love if you could follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe on YouTube, and for this week, we're actually giving a test run on streaming this to our Twitter handle. So those of you watching on Twitter or X, hello, I'm JAYM Rosenthal, so at JAYM Rosenthal on X.com. So welcome all of you watching there. So give us a follow. In a moment, I'm going to bring up Krista Raymer, the founder and CEO of Vetrina, the foremost cannabis retail consultancy. We have a good conversation coming up with her, so hang tight for that. And here's what is driving the cannabis news today and quickly. Last year, recall a group of cannabis companies hired powerhouse law firm Boies, Schiller, Flexner to sue the federal government over prohibition. The firm's namesake, David Boies, represented Al Gore in Bush v. Gore, among other notable cases. So this is really about as high profile as it gets. And specifically, the suit seeks to declare the Controlled Substances Act unconstitutional as it pertains to state legal cannabis businesses within the context of how the CSA applies to intra-state commerce, that is, state commerce within a state's borders. Now, this means that cannabis companies want the federal government to treat them like any other business, allowing regular access to the banking system, tax deductions, and for employees to have no trouble getting mortgages or credit cards. And this week, in fact, yesterday, a judge in Massachusetts federal court heard oral arguments for the case. It's pretty wonky stuff. Here's a little bit of a breakdown, but I would absolutely encourage you to go to cultivated.news to read Jeremy Burke, our editor-in-chief's write-up of it. Here are the three main issues they were talking about yesterday: intrastate versus interstate commerce and the Commerce Clause itself, whether cannabis companies have been reasonably injured by the federal government's prohibition, and importantly and recently, how rescheduling cannabis to Schedule 3 of the Controlled Substances Act would affect these issues. We will be following this closely. We will give you updates as they become available, so you don't have to, in fact, listen to a federal court case happen in real time, because it would be helpful if you were a lawyer. We have folks we're talking to, so follow us, cultivated.news. It's not going to happen quickly in federal court. The DOJ actually asked for the case to be dismissed yesterday, a process that could take months or even years. And whatever happens, expect the judge's ruling to be appealed. So some legal experts we talked to said they don't expect a district court judge to break from a precedent set by the Supreme Court in 2005, which held it as is. But with such a powerhouse law firm involved, there's a first time for everything, and things seem to be on the move in cannabis. So stay tuned for that. What else is happening? This is important. In New York, the state has stopped issuing new loans through the controversial $200 million social equity fund run by the Dormitory Authority of New York. So that's DASNY. There was reporting from the city, that's capital, all capitals, the city, it's a publication in New York, wrote a bombshell piece about Chicago Atlantic and the firm that's providing the actual loans and the expense of the social equity linked entrepreneurs to pay back those loans. So that seems to be halted, at least for now. With that, I'm going to bring up Krista Raymer. She appears to be ready backstage. So much anticipation. Hey, Krista.
Hey, Jay.
How are you?
Great. How are you?
Never a dull moment in cannabis. Lawsuits, markets opening, markets tweaking. That's sort of what we talked about yesterday with Joe Rossi from New York. He's a big lobbyist, talking about how it works, what the reform in New York is going to mean for entrepreneurs there. But I wanted to talk to you about something different.
Okay. What are we talking about?
And this falls in the category of things Jay doesn't know, which is a pretty big category, even bigger on Thursday mornings when I connect with you. You posted something on LinkedIn. That's how I start so many conversations. You talked about margin percentage versus margin dollars, and how you can get those wrong and show entirely different pictures of how your inventory and store is producing. Can you run down what you were writing about?
Yeah, like I think one of the things that keeps showing up from a big picture perspective is which KPIs you use within a retail environment to define what is or isn't working and what our measurement of success is. Now, we talk a lot about gross margin. We talk about like margins being slim, the impact of pricing compression on margins. Like it's always about margin and it's always in reference to margin percentage. But margin percentage doesn't tell a profit dollars story.
Right.
So you can have high margin, but if you don't have a lot of velocity or there isn't a high frequency of sale, for example, it doesn't result in profit dollars. So the example that I used on LinkedIn was like, let's say we had two companies. One company has a 20% margin and maybe one has a 15%. If the company A has $100,000 in sales, but company B has, $1 million in sales, what's the split in difference in terms of actual cash that you have at the end of the month? And that is such an important picture when we think about cash planning, ability to finance things like inventory and growth, is we actually have to have the cash to be able to support the business. So although margins can be like a really great temperature check or something to know whether we're like in line or not in line, it isn't necessarily the best indicator of how much cash we're actually making in the business. So margin is a temperature check KPI, whereas margin dollars actually represent something that is more actionable from a decision-making perspective.
Yeah, and so that makes sense to me, and I want to overlay that actually on something you mentioned a few shows ago, which is also the KPIs that you look at, which is month to month is a really challenging metric because of the numbers of weekends, for example, the number of days in the month. Some months have 5 weekends, that throws things into chaos, and so it's like almost there's a number of KPIs taken together and looked at with a lens that is more thoughtful than just month to month or total margin percentage, that when you actually break down the KPIs over the right amounts of time and look at the right things, you may get a clearer picture or a better picture or more actionable picture of how your shop or shops are doing.
Totally. I think like what's important to note is just like in retail is everything has an interaction. Like it doesn't exist in its own funnel. And by that, I mean like you don't do something in store and it only have one impact. It's going to have a trickle effect of other impacts. So it's hard to look at KPIs and identify what is the causation versus correlation related to them. So they need to be looked at as a set, and different KPIs are going to be important to different businesses, especially at different points in their growth. But what is important is to be able to look at them from a consistent time frame where you're comparing kind of like the loose terms like apples to apples, where the data sets or the time frames are comparable and you understand the rate of change within those KPIs. And that is like something that is not easy to do with rigor, and it actually takes the KPI and awareness to be built more into the teams in store. So I would say like if we are only looking at margin percentage and we're only looking at margin dollars and that doesn't make it all the way down to store managers, we've got a gap in our kind of like knowledge that flows through all levels of an organization. And so there's a case to be had to say, how do we create more KPI awareness and understanding of how KPIs are interrelated with store managers so that they can also provide better feedback to be able to make better decisions.
Yeah, but I also want to ask you, like, I like to zoom out and look at other retail environments or retail sectors.
Yeah.
Like if you had 25 years experience in a store that looked like X, you would have a lot of this information. You'd be looking at these things. There are people dedicated to this exact issue and metrics, but we're so new. Even in the oldest cannabis markets, we don't have, we maybe have 5, 6, 7 years of data. We just don't have it yet, right?
Yeah, I mean, the definition of new is always kind of like fleeting, and I think it depends on what the KPI is that you're looking at as well, to understand the nuances that went in it. Yeah, our data set is not very big, meaning like we don't have a lot of unique points that all had the same attributes today. So our sales today look very different than they did last year. Prices are different, product assortment is different, number of stores open is different, and so it's hard. But actually, like even if we zoom out bigger, and we were talking a little bit about this before we hopped on, but like if we zoom out bigger, this is a struggle within retail, like in every industry. This isn't unique to cannabis. I think the most interesting example is Red Lobster, and like everybody's talking about like endless shrimp made them go bankrupt. Endless shrimp didn't make them go bankrupt. There were definitely some interesting real estate plays there, like I think in the 2000s. But what is really interesting is actually when you start to make decisions based off of only data and not connect it back to the customer behavior. Because what they didn't realize in the decision to go down the path of endless shrimp is that they didn't realize the uptick in the number of people that would take advantage of it and how much they would take advantage of that. So it's like if you and I were to go to dinner and one of us were to select that option, we weren't just eating like 2 persons worth of endless shrimp. We were eating like 6 or 8 people's volumes worth of endless shrimp. And so that's understanding also like, where do we have margin? Where do we have margin dollars to be able to play with what our promotions are and how our customers are purchasing?
Yeah, it is interesting. It is interesting. Just one note, we have a comment, which we don't always have. We have a comment. This was a specific example to talking about not looking at month to month, but looking at sort of set time frames, month over month or something. March this year had 5 weekends and April only had 4. April did have 420, but as you like to say, like March, even 420, even with 420, it marked a period of time in March, looks like a period of time in April, looks like a period of time in May as well. But I think it is compelling to think about it in standardized chunks, so you actually are measuring apples to apples, oranges to oranges, and the like. Anything else catching your eye these days on the cannabis landscape? Well, one thing I want to mention is that obviously this is a long weekend in the States, a big one at that, the official or unofficial kickoff to summer. We had the similar one here in Canada last weekend. Cannabis and fireworks, don't use them together, but you can enjoy fireworks while using cannabis. Just don't light off fireworks while you're consuming.
This is an excellent PSA.
I think so. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I did, and Krista, you know, and this happens in U.S. cities too. But May 24, so Victoria Day weekend in Canada, last Monday, I had a hockey game late on Monday night. Driving through the city, like it's not like people go to fields to light off fireworks in Toronto. They like go to their laneways and light them off just everywhere. It's pretty incredible and so dangerous. That's my
street in Toronto has like an area where they set off fireworks every year, like big like fireworks on Canada Day, and like the whole community funds it. Everybody donates a little bit, and then somebody goes and buys all of the fireworks. It's like these streets are not wide enough to be able to do this.
Certainly not. But we we've mentioned this in the past couple of weeks. There are some product variations that do really well in the summer, and I would imagine retailers need to consider that as they put their inventory together for not just this weekend, but July 1st or July 4th, Labor Day weekend, long weekends in the summer as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's how you look at the data to see it. There's a woman on my team, her name is Adrienne, and she is killer with visualization of data. And what she did is actually take changes in category and time lapsed them so that you could see kind of like how categories shift and change over the year. And one of the things that's very clear is the way that pre-rolls change in their behavior into the summer. Now we've had some pretty significant kind of like changes to that category just as a whole over the last 3 years, really. And also more so in the last 2 years around, like infused pre-rolls. But the uptick in terms of single pre-rolls and what that sales process looks like kind of like into June all the way into like middle of September, trails off into October is really significant. So it's an important call out to like look at the assortment and say, do we have enough options at the right price points for our customers to be able to purchase this way? Because it is a product that sells all year, but specifically the basket penetration over the summer and the ability for it to pull sales from other categories is important. What's actually really important to think about within that is that the price points are lower. So there can be unintended consequences when it comes to basket sizes if we're not strategically thinking through how pre-rolls supplement the basket size or are the new basket size. But there's a frequency of purchase consideration in there as well.
sort of goes to what we talked about last week, which is basket drivers and impulse
Basket drivers
purchases.
versus
Like a pre-roll
impulse.
could be one or both. Like it could be either. It's
Mhm.
up to the bud tender and the staff to understand what the customer came in for. See, I do listen week to week, and I go back. I'm going to make a great bud tender at the end of all these sessions.
We're gonna open a store, and you are going to be the bud tender in the store.
Well, what folks don't know is that before Chris and I come on, we do talk about our hopes and dreams, and I don't think it's even hidden that I do want to open like a Play It Against Sports, and I'm already training the kids about to identify why people are coming into the store. If they're coming in for skates, that's the basket driver. If they're coming in for skates, a nice impulse purchase is laces, maybe a couple different pairs of laces, maybe a skate guard. See, I am paying attention. I really am.
I'm glad that we're training you in anticipation for your store opening.
It's not opening yet, but if anybody does want to go in on a Play It Against Sports in the Toronto area, I'm game. Chris is game. Krista, one note, I did want to mention that it's not you or me panting, it's your dog.
Yes, you
Dogs.
can hear that. Great.
Yes. It's
They're having
almost
a
like
grand
they're
old
wearing the
time.
AirPods.
Yes, they're having a grand old time.
They love this show. Krista, I appreciate you every Thursday. You'll be back next Thursday. We get into the summer swing of things. Thank you again for your time, your expertise. Thank you all for watching today. This is Cultivated Live. Tomorrow we have another New York-focused Cultivated Live. We have Freeman Klopat. He is the former Director of Communications for the Office of Cannabis Management in New York. So lots of talk about what's happening in New York. He's now the Vice President of Merino at an important and often cannabis-focused PR firm in New York, but he was the Director of Communications for the OCM in New York. We had Joe Rossi on this week. We had Aaron Gittleman on last week. So lots of talk about what's happening in New York. We really look forward to that. That is at 10 a.m. Eastern tomorrow, Friday, March 24th, right going into the long weekend in the States. You can find us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and today on Twitter. We're going to keep doing that because people seem to be engaged and interested. Krista, thank you so much for your time. We will see you next Thursday. Have a good long weekend.
Thanks, guys.
You got it. Bye, everybody. We'll see you